My son Thomas Kelly was just 18 years old. He was full of passion, uncertainty, and hope for the future. After graduating from school, he was offered a cadetship in a Sydney accounting firm and was studying commerce part-time here at Macquarie University. From a sensitive, shy, and often mischievous child, he was just starting out his life, gaining confidence as a young adult. He loved coming home to our house in the Southern Highlands and just hanging out with his family on the weekends. My husband Ralph, myself, and our children, Madeline and Stuart, who were 17 and 14 at the time. One weekend, he decided to stay in the city to celebrate a friend's 18th birthday. We told him to be careful and to take care. Our last words were, "I love you," and he said, "I love you too, Mum." Thomas was on the brink of a new relationship, and he was holding a girl's hand as they headed to a private room in a King's Cross club. It was just after 10 p.m. on Saturday, the 7th of July, 2012. 20 minutes later, the phone rang in our Barrel home. I thought it'd be Tom, wanting directions. He'd grown up in a small country town, and he didn't know the city very well. "This is St Vincent's Hospital. Your son has been attacked." I couldn't comprehend what they were saying, so I quickly passed the phone to Ralph. The person on the other end said that we needed to get to the hospital immediately. Leaving Madeline and Stuart behind, we sped up the highway, not knowing what to expect. As we approached the hospital, there were so many young people walking towards the bright lights of the cross. It was just after midnight, and we were met by two police officers waiting outside emergency. They asked for Mr. and Mrs. Kelly. I think at that point Ralph knew that something was terribly wrong. I don't know what I thought. I just wanted to see Thomas. But instead of taking us into emergency, they took us to a room nearby. And then I heard these words: "Your son is in surgery, his condition is critical, and it will take a miracle for him to survive." We waited outside the intensive care for what seemed like an eternity. It was about 4 a.m. when we finally went in to see our beautiful boy. I can't begin to describe what it was like seeing him lying there, hooked up to so many machines. His hair was crimson red with his own blood, and there was blood in his ears and nostrils. His head was shaven on the left side, and there was a bandage that said, "No bone." His eyes were open, but there was no expression. Following his surgery to relieve the pressure on his brain, Thomas's intracranial pressure rose to 65. We had no idea what that meant, except that we were told it needed to be around 20 for him to survive. A normal ICP, like yours and mine, is 4. We watched that machine for hours, praying that it would come down, and eventually it did settle around 20, and we thought a miracle had happened. But when the new team of medical staff arrived the following morning, the ICU doctor took Ralph and I aside, and she said, "I'm 100% certain that Thomas's brain has died." How could this have happened? I had never faced a crisis, so I did what I knew how to do best, to be a mother. I contacted members of our family. I was worried about leaving our pets alone, a dog, 2 cats and some turtles. I made phone calls, spoke to doctors and nurses, and I made sure that everyone else was okay. And when there was no more to do, I sat with Thomas and loved him with everything I had. My sister drove to Barrel, and she brought Madeline, Stuart, and my mother to the hospital. Other family members arrived. We had to relive that shocking moment all over again, as they were told that Thomas's brain had died. Soon the conversation turned to the possibility of organ donation, something that Thomas had signed up for just a year before when he got his licence. I found this terribly confronting. I did not want anyone to touch my boy. But my family did not feel this way. They said, "Mum, it's not fair, but we should give other people life." The next day, many of Tom's friends arrived at the hospital. Some fell to their knees when they saw him. I was still in mother mode, greeting people, hugging them, and making sure they went in to say goodbye to him. But the time to turn off the life support was looming. The medical team said they wanted to do some further tests to make sure that Thomas was brain dead. We watched as ice-cold water was poured into his ears to see if there was any reaction. There was none. They removed the ventilator and Thomas expelled air from his lungs. This was not a breath, but because of it, they were not able to declare him brain dead. This resulted in Thomas having to die of cardiac arrest, which meant his heart could not be donated. On Monday at 8 p.m, we held Thomas tightly. We watched as his heart started to slow down. He began to turn blue, and eventually his heart stopped. We watched our son and brother suffocate in front of us. The doctor came in and said we had 3 minutes. We knew that to delay any longer would mean that his organs would not be viable. So we held him in our arms, and then they took him away. Later that night, Ralph and I left the children in a hotel room while we went back to the hospital to identify Thomas's body in the morgue, a requirement following organ donation. This was incredibly difficult, and the 2 police officers with us wept. Just 18 minutes before, our phone rang in Barrel and we got that call. Thomas stepped out of a taxi. He was talking to a friend on the phone, getting directions. He'd only taken a few steps when a drunken teenager stepped off the wall ahead, out of the shadows of Victoria Street, walked straight up to Thomas, and King hit him in the face. Without any warning, it was totally unprovoked. Immediately, Thomas fell backwards onto the pavement, and his skull was severely cracked. The teenager who'd been drinking for hours ran off. He'd already assaulted 1 person and went on to punch 3 more that night, without any warning. He was known to have said, "I'm going to bash someone tonight." The morning after the life support was turned off, the police asked us to appear at a press conference. We wanted someone to come forward with information about who had killed our son. We returned home to Barrel in an absolute state of shock and disbelief, but we still had to try and function somehow. People were arriving with flowers and food, and the doorbell and phone were constantly ringing. Ralph's time was taken up with frequent phone calls from homicide, and I felt that I was dealing with everything else. 2 weeks later, the 18-year-old offender was arrested and charged with Thomas's murder. The next day was Thomas's funeral. Soon, everyone had gone, and we were engulfed by grief. The tragedy of losing Thomas all but destroyed us, emotionally, physically, mentally, and financially. We have, however, received such enormous community support, and we are so grateful for the many people that have come into our lives. One mother wrote to us and said, "I hope there might be a small amount of comfort knowing there is an army of parents walking beside you." Surviving such a loss is difficult enough, but we had so much more to go through. Our son had lost his life at someone else's hands. Our anger towards this thug who took Thomas from us is indescribable. After an agonising wait and many court appearances, the offender received just 4 years for the lesser charge of manslaughter. He has never shown an ounce of remorse, and we've been told he struts around prison, boasting he is Thomas Kelly's killer. This was the moment where everything changed for us. We knew we had a choice. We could do nothing, or we could fight back. Our grief turned into anger, which in turn became determination. We fought with everything we had, and shortly after the sentence was handed down, the Attorney General demanded that the Director of the Department of Public Prosecution seek an appeal. Eventually the DPP acted, the courts agreed, and the offender's time in prison was doubled. Until Thomas was killed, and we still believe he was murdered, I had no idea of the love affair that so many Australians have with alcohol. We have the third largest police force in the Western world, and 70% of its resources are tied up with alcohol-fueled violence. Australia is an alcoholic. There are 24,000 victims of alcohol-related domestic violence, 20,000 victims of alcohol-related child abuse, 157,000 hospitalisations, 5,500 deaths. The cost to society is $15 billion nationally every single year. It's time we rethink the way we drink. Are you aware that alcohol-related cancers kill more Australians than does melanoma? That 20% of breast cancer is caused due to alcohol abuse? And there are predators waiting outside clubs and pubs to pick up intoxicated young women, offering them a lift home and then sexually assaulting them. It's time we stood up and demanded important changes. People need to wake up to this epidemic. In September 2013, we launched a formidable foundation as a legacy to our son, Thomas Kelly. Its prime purpose is to get all of our children home safely. Since February 2014, the foundation has implemented more CCTV cameras across the city and throughout King's Cross. We've done research, and the recommendation has been implemented by both the City of Sydney and the state government. We've advocated for changes to the judicial laws, and we've also advocated for lockouts and last drinks. While some of this has been controversial, cumulatively these achievements have resulted in a 50% reduction in admissions to the emergency department of St Vincent's Hospital, and there's a 20% decrease in violence across New South Wales, and we no longer have neurosurgeons on standby every single weekend. In addition to these campaigns, we've launched safe spaces in the city and King's Cross. They're run by volunteers. The Take Care Safe Space is in memory of Thomas, who was known as TK amongst his friends. The Take Care Ambassadors walk the streets of Sydney, helping vulnerable youth. They might just be helping with directions, handing out some water, charging a mobile phone, or giving out some thongs. Sometimes they save someone from sexual assault, and sometimes they even save a life. We spell care with a K. Thomas started life as a pretty vivacious little boy. He was always full on except when he was asleep. Through the years, he loved to do things that all other boys his age enjoyed. He particularly liked messing around with his younger brother, getting outside kicking a footy, playing his guitar or drums, and he desperately wanted to have a girlfriend. I sometimes think that we misunderstood Tom at times. He was such a sensitive soul. I found it really difficult not being there for him when he struggled to adjust to boarding school and when he was bullied for just being who he was. Thomas was a brave and beautiful soul. He had plans for a wonderful life. And for those of us that were privileged to be part of his family and those who became his friend, they knew that Thomas was loyal to the core and honest as the day is long. As he grew older, we could see how determined he became. He always stood up, no matter how he was treated, for what he believed in. And he could look himself in the mirror and be proud of the young man staring back at him. One day, he said, "You wait and see. I'm going to show all of you just how successful I'm going to be." I always knew that Thomas would make something of his life, and now everyone in this country knows who Thomas Kelly was. They know he was a good, decent kid who did not deserve to die the way that he did. We've had a terrible journey to endure, but the one who lost the most was Thomas. I know that Ralph and I would have done anything to take his place so that he could live his life. Thomas taught me to be a mother. Every day I cry and I ache to hold him. Every night I talk to him before I go to sleep. I ask for his forgiveness for not being able to protect him. I believe when he died, Thomas was happy. I think of him walking along the street, holding a pretty girl's hand, heading to a party. I'm thankful he did not see the punch coming. We will never stop missing and loving him, but I'm still a wife, still a mother to 2 beautiful children who need me, and we will always be our family of 5. The donation of Thomas's organs has already saved lives, and so too do the Take Care ambassadors who walk the streets of Sydney for our children. If Thomas's gift was to make a difference, then we are very proud to be a part of that. My purpose in life has changed. Mine now is to be the voice of change, the voice that starts the conversation in our families, in our workplace, and our communities. I want people to stand up for the much-needed change in the behaviour of our youth and their drinking culture. Our New South Wales Police Commissioner, Andrew Scipione, said, "We cannot arrest ourselves out of this problem. The community needs to step up to create change." I would like to see more respect, see people take responsibility for their actions, and value all relationships. I want people to realise the dangers of living in a world where violence and the abuse of drugs and alcohol is so normal. We lost Thomas for absolutely nothing, and I want his death to be the beginning of something extraordinary. We're only given one life, so think when you're out drinking. Take care of yourself and your friends. It's in the power of now that we're able to take a simple breath. It's right now we're able to hold someone's hand and tell them that we love them. It's now we're able to be grateful for our family and friends. For Thomas, none of those simple things are possible any longer. So I ask you as you leave here today to empower now, stand up for what you believe in, take care, and say never again. Thank you.